you know, similar to the down smash ledge trap we got into, a little like the mix up we got into, where it's like, hey, like I will attack this at the source to make you play differently.
So, real quick to go back to that ledge thing, down smash is a commitment. Is by default we should be doing our F tilt and just angling it for when they get up, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure I knew that.
Down smash is really interesting because it's one of those things where the value of it really depends on your opponent's perception of the move. As the Sephiroth player, for me, I actually don't think down smash is very good at all.
Okay.
I think up smash is the best smash tech overall, like in general, and then obviously forward smash is like just straight up not good.
Yeah, dog water.
Down smash is okay, but it doesn't do nearly as much shield damage as you would want in a lot of the scenarios.
You have to land a hit first, right, for it to actually
it's usually not breaking the shield straight up. But obviously, the win condition of a shield break is very valuable for any character, especially because Sephiroth has the neutral B F smash. So a lot of players will be really preemptive and afraid of it, and that's where the value of it shoots up, because they might be more afraid of it than they should be, because they might think it does more shield damage or something like that. And that's where you can afford to do like really preemptive sword swings, just because they're probably going to be very airborne. They might not be shielding as much, which also means they probably won't be parrying as much. So the inherent threat of down smash becomes really valuable if you can tell they're afraid of it. But, you know, obviously in reality, it's not nearly as scary as they think it is, because it's not just going to pop their shield out of nowhere.
Okay.
So it really depends on your opponent, whereas up smash has some of the inherent values of down smash without some of the flaws.
Can you like two-frame with it? Like, how are you using up smash ledge guard? I'm at ledge right now.
It's also like a ledge trap, whereas the preemptive back hit of it you can use at the same timing as you would use against someone rushing off the ledge with down smash. And you would get that sweet spot with the back hit. Like a lot of players might like jump. And if you time it as they get up, especially with wing, if they neutral get up into shield, they're not going to punish it.
Interesting.
If you're timing it as they get up or something like that.
Okay.
And you can apply the same logic of using the platform as a roof.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm throwing you above and I'm playing against like a slow floaty character, like that can be a checkmate sometimes, especially with wing. So overall, I think up smash has more general use. It also does technically have some of the value that down smash is supposed to be unique to itself.
Okay. So some questions for you.
No problem.
What's the first thing you try to learn from a new opponent? From the perspective of Sephiroth, like, because you're all about learning their mood, gathering that information, and capitalizing on it later, where a lot of people more so just autopilot until they get in a scenario they know, and then they kind of go from there. Like, what are you doing? Like, you never met Mars before, here's a Zero Suit Samus, like, what the fuck do you do, kind of thing. Like, I guess, like, I don't know, I'm starting to go to the local. I don't know these people, they're half my age, I don't care to know them, but I do want to play Smash.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. My entire, like, because I've been doing this for like 10 years, so my entire like life has been dedicated to speeding up that process of learning my opponent. You know, you're only going to have like
you get three rounds at best sometimes.
Yeah, you're only going to have a few games to work with, so I can't start from scratch every single time.
Right.
It's just not going to be consistent. Even if Sephiroth was the best character in the game, I wouldn't want it to be that way. So, you know, it starts before you're even playing for me. Like, it's kind of like an obsession for me. Like I'm always reading sports psychology books whenever I'm at a tournament. I'm always paying attention to people's body language and how they talk, and I'm trying to connect that into their behavior in Smash. Nice. So as soon as I'm striking stages with my opponent, like, I'm already like paying attention to them, and I might try to make a read on how they'll perform in the game based on the way they're talking, or their body language, or the stages they strike. And if I know the character they play, the process is already starting there. And I guess first, to answer your question about like what to do against someone you've never played before, like what am I looking for?
Yes.
As Sephiroth, it would probably be whatever I can do to convince them that locking into shield is the play.
Right.
Whether it's like visual cues or just general movement, because once I lock them into shield and I can justify like, oh, they have a weaker shield than me, that's the first small advantage for me to start actually using Sephiroth's sword moves, because they have a more likely success rate if their shield isn't healthy, because they might run into it, they might jump into it, they might get shield poked, etc. So that's the first thing I'll look to. That's why something like this, you even mentioned like releasing the flare once in a while, which is interesting because something like this I actually value a lot. But if I'm explaining this to someone that doesn't really play Smash, it's like, what's the value of this, right?
Oh, that's huge. This is the greatest thing ever. Well, not
Yeah,
ever,
exactly.
but it's fucking up there.
You get so much value from your opponent responding to it or not responding to it. Like if my opponent doesn't respond to it at all, it's like, okay, that's good to know. They're not afraid of it. I'm not going to force anything. But if I do this and my opponent jumps to that platform, that's such good information. They might jump off ledge, they might jump out of disadvantage, they might do this and that, and like the ball's already rolling, and I haven't even thrown the projectile at them.
Nice.
The hardest thing about it is obviously the projectile itself is terrible, so it's hard to scare them with that type of thing, but it's still really good. It's very similar to like moving around while shadow flaring and stuff like that, where you're just doing whatever you can, you're giving them a couple visual cues and seeing how they respond, and like once my opponent has slowed down and starts locking themselves into shield in any match with any character, for me that's kind of like a win in the sense of it's kind of like they've accepted that they're getting like outmaneuvered in neutral and they're locking them, they're like kind of turtling a little bit, and that's where you can really start to dance on them, especially with a character like Sephiroth whose fast fall is so good. Where you can really start bullying them with grabs, or you can start fast fall back airing their shield, and you really start slowing them down, and now you're in a situation where you get to position all you want and they're not, brute forcing it, and you're running away from them. So if you can somehow convince them that Sephiroth is like kind of outmaneuvering them, it's very, very helpful. And obviously it's not easy, but there's a lot of things you can learn to, I think, help like out creative your opponent or confuse them a little bit, because we even haven't even really talked about like blade dash or anything like that.
Blade dash is fucking spicy. I feel like there's so much there that I'm just
exactly.
like
It's probably the most underutilized general move at any level of play from Sephiroth. I feel like even the best Sephiroth players in the world like just aren't really using it.
What are you doing, man? You're slacking, Gavin.
I feel like even it kind of connects to that down tilt we were talking about earlier, where it's kind of like a nice way to threaten that type of landing without committing to one of your slow moves. With blade dash, it's the same thing. A lot of players are really a big fan, including myself, of doing it out of the corner, because you play patiently in the corner, you're waiting a little bit, you see some visual cue, and you go right through them. It's kind of like a character like Fox probably would like to be able to do that, but their side B doesn't go through shield, whereas Sephiroth does. Yeah, whereas Sephiroth does, and he gets like all the different angles from above as well. Like if you're center stage right here and I do this, not only am I crossing you up, I'm also tapping your shield a little bit, and I'm repositioning for the next scenario. It's another one of those moves where it checks every box at once, while also being a bit creative and can throw your opponent off. So I'm a huge fan of it.
Do you treat it like a string or a combo? Like, because there's some angles, man, hitting it with a fucking box is brutal, but there's some angles where it props them up. Like, I think I was floating around here. Could you have done a jump back here, or is that not something to be?
It will never ever be true.
Okay.
Like there will never be any true combo off of blade dash, unfortunately. But what I will compare it to is that scenario I talked about where you're looking to see if they do anything greedy after tapping them with shadow flare. It's very similar.
Oh yeah, like they're gonna mash nair or something.
As soon as you pop them up, you look for a resource or a swing.
Okay.
And if they don't give it to you, that's fine. You can just play patiently and take the positioning. But if they do something like a buffered jump or a buffered air dodge, that's where something like instant double jump aerial comes in, or that's something where like dash attacking the landing comes in, or something like that, right?
Okay.
It's one of those scenarios where you're really testing their knowledge of the frame advantage, because like you asked, like, is there a combo here? Your opponent's definitely not going to know if there's a combo there because they're not playing Sephiroth. Right. So, once you hit them with that blade dash is essentially the question of like, hey, do you know?
Yeah.
Do you know the scenario you're in or not? And if they don't, and they burn a resource that they didn't have to burn, then you can take advantage of it for sure. Because if you double jump and I hit you off stage, a lot of characters get checkmated by like the counter on their edge guard or something like that. So it's one of those scenarios where that's just how Sephiroth is going to win in general, where he's going to choke out as many resources as he can and try to checkmate you a little bit.
Gotcha.
Just because from the range he has or something like that. That's why I really value moves like Suicide Up B to close out games. Because as risky and difficult as it can be, in a lot of situations, technically it's checkmate.
Oh, okay.
I guess you can follow people with it, which is nice.
Like if it's last stock and they burned all their resources and they're drifting to recover, they only have one route to recover. Like technically that's checkmate because like no one's going to avoid this.
Yeah, fair. So one thing that I gotta know because it's bothered me so much.
I play with the Game & Watch who's pretty good. Bucket seems to invalidate all of side B, and side B is where we get a lot of information. So what I have started to do is if I just flash flare, not side B, but flare, it at least like prompts a bucket, and then I can try and work with that. Or I'll throw a side B away from them to try and bait out a bucket. But like aside from that, I've kind of just been like, okay, this is garbage. I just can't press B anymore.
Yeah.
Am I approaching that correctly, or is that mistaken?
Getting creative with it is really important. Rather than like getting rid of the option altogether, getting creative with it is really important because with Game & Watch Bucket specifically, when he releases it, it is one of his laggier options. Like if he doesn't actually absorb anything and he has to let go of the bucket.
Okay.
With Diddy Kong, I'm kind of dealing with a similar thing because he reflects the banana toss. So a lot of the time I'm trying to get him to commit to the bucket at like a poor range so I can actually like monkey flip him or something like that.
Right.
With Sephiroth, it's a little similar. It's more difficult to get him to do something really punishable with it just because Sephiroth isn't like throwing a projectile or anything. But what's nice about it is you can't afford to let him bucket a side B or two and let him know that you're not afraid to do it because as long as you don't give him the third bucket, it's okay. So throughout the game, I think you can pace yourself.
Okay.
Because imagine something like this. Like, if I'm against not Sephiroth, if I'm against Game & Watch, and I land a side B in a scenario like that while he's airborne,
yeah.
As soon as Game & Watch gets out of hit stun, he's probably gonna up B or down air or something.
Yeah.
So if I can reset his air mobility and like tap him with something and really test his discipline. Imagine the reward from landing a counter on his down air. He'll just explode. So without side B, you don't really have a way to do that like small little tap and like threat. So it's worth the shot. It's really difficult because you only have like 2 or 3 chances.
Yeah, it's a tight window.
So, but it is interesting in the fact of getting him to use bucket preemptively. Whereas if you just disregard your neutral B and side B altogether, he's never gonna have to bucket, and he's just gonna play like Game & Watch, and you're gonna have a hard time. But the threat of your projectile and the threat of bucket will slow things down, and it's gonna be a lot comfortable for Sephiroth. I think if he instead of just running into you and going crazy, occasionally going for a bucket, I think is worth the sacrifice. You know what I mean?
Right.
Especially because he might be a little more grounded. He's going to be a little slower. It's gonna complement reverse up air, and things like that. But yeah, surprisingly, despite it being like Game & Watch being slower and getting outranged by Sephiroth, it can be very, very difficult, especially because his crouch is so valuable versus most of Sephiroth's moves.
Yep.
So it is a very complicated matchup. Sadly, you can't just outrange him. But there's a lot of interesting things. Like Sephiroth's up air is very good versus a landing Game & Watch because you can kind of. I feel like you're one of the few characters that can disrespect down air. Like you can attack it without putting yourself at risk.
Yeah.
A lot of characters don't have the range or mobility to like position around it. They usually have to like respect it before Game & Watch even lands. So It's interesting, but yeah, I think you're on the right track with dealing with Bucket because you're not getting rid of your special moves altogether.
Right.
Because like we've been saying, like it's not like he absorbs one Shadow Flare and it's game over. Like if he absorbs 2 or 3, it's fine, and at least the Bucket itself when it releases isn't going to be strong.